Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
Sasuke were performing the ritual to seal the final Biju, Kyuubi into the seal and revive the Jubi so Madara can become its host and rule the world. 9 ethereal dragons came out of the demon statue Gedo Mazo, and head for the unconscious form of Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. When they wrap around the blonde's body, they form into an orb and Naruto floats into the air. Madara smirks behind his mask while Sasuke smiles evilly also. Soon I shall have the power of the Jubi and the world will be mine. Madara says, in the end Dobi you have failed. Now the world belongs to the Uchiha clan like it should have in the beginning. The prick says and chuckles evilly. They started the process and the demon statue started to act up and tremble. The chakra coming out of the dragon turned white and started to reverse itself, shocking Madara and Sasuke. What's going on here? The founder of Konoha yelled while Sasuke kept looking at the scene in shock. Madara narrowed his Sharingan eye at the blonde and noticed a smirk was on his face. He then saw Naruto mouth a word with his lips and Madara's eyes widen in horror when he realized what he says, fool. No, he couldn't have. Sasuke stopped the jutsu. He yelled out in fear while Sasuke looks at him like he's crazy. Why? We are close to obtaining the ultimate power Madara, so why are you? He was cut off by his ancestor releasing a blast of murderous intent upon his only surviving relative. Don't be stupid, he's placed a powerful fuinjutsu on himself that'll reverse the effects of the sealing. We must stop it, Madara declared until the reversal in the chakra started to move faster and faster until a black vortex formed around the seal on his stomach and the chakra of the other tailed 8 beasts started to get into the vortex. Madara's eye widens even more when he sees what's happening. All the effort and planning he made throughout the years in order to make the world his in control with the power of the original Biju and the power of his ancestors was all thwarted and by a mere child. His eyes glowed in anger and rage and he grits his teeth in fury. No, my plans. That damned Uzumaki has ruined my plans. He yells out and tries to cancel the jutsu by forcing his chakra into the ritual, but it doesn't work and he curses. Sasuke, help me stop the jutsu. He yells out, getting a nod from the teenager. He adds his chakra to cancel the jutsu, but it fails and something else happens. He notices his hands fading away and being stretched and drawn to the vortex. The wind directing to the vortex grew stronger and Sasuke's eyes widen in horror as he is drawn into the seal. What's going on? I'm being drawn into the vortex. He says and tries to pull himself away using his chakra only to be drawn in faster. And no, this can't be happening, this can't be happening. Damn you Dobi, damn you ARRRGGHHHH. He cries out as his head and the rest of his body stretches out and gets into the vortex. Madara saw this and the same thing was happening to him. Naruto started to chuckle and then laugh as this was happening. He trembled in fury and glared at the blonde with every single ounce of hatred he could muster. Damn you Hashirama and your Uzumaki brethren. Damn you Minato Namikaze and your family for ruining my ambitions. I will not die like this. I am immortal. I'm an Uchiha. I am a good. He screams out in denial as he was into the vortex while the multicolored chakra continued to enter the vortex that was on Naruto's stomach. Naruto's mindscape. He opened his eyes to the familiar blood-red walls, but inside the cage was a rather house surrounded by grass and wild flowers. It wasn't overly big like that of a mansion, but it had 2 stories and had a lot of room. He looked around, noticed the lake, river, and waterfall behind the house, and foxes running around yipping. He smiled and shook his head at this. Hitomi-chan, he called, waiting for the redhead to walk out of the red house. The door soon opened and the sight made his eyes go wide. A woman with blood-red hair walked out of the house with no shoes on, leaving her feet out for the world to see. Her toenails were painted blood red and they wriggled as they walked through the green grass. His eyes traveled around her body and he looks at her sleek and smooth legs that crawled up her body and hid themselves away under a mini skirt. Her skirt was a red-orange color and it went up to her curvy waist. Her black shirt had a red nine-tailed fox on it and it fit her hourglass figure perfectly and it showed off her bust, which was a nice size but not too big. Her arms swung at her sides as she walked, the nails painted black and red as she sauntered over to him. He can clearly see the muscles which was lean and increased to her feminine appearance. His eyes traveled from her torso to her slender and pale neck and ivory skin that was light and soft, it would make you want to kiss it. As she approached the blonde, he looked into her ruby-red slit eyes and his expression went from happiness to sadness and sorrow. Hitomi-chan, he starts to say until she puts her finger on his lips to silence him, smiling sadly at the young sage. I know Naruto-kun, but it is the only way. If there was another way I would have found it, but sadly, I'll end up being one with the other Biju also and you will be the new Jubi in a way because you'll have its power. You've also gained both Madara's and Sasuke's Sharingans as well as their abilities when you absorbed their souls into yours. You also have the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and the DNA of the Uchiha clan is now a part of you. Once you absorb the other 8 and then me, I'll be no more. She finished and looks down at the ground and notices droplets falling on the ground. She looks up and sees Naruto's shoulders shaking and tears were falling from his face in anger and sorrow. It deeply hurt her to see her lover in such a state and that this has happened to him, but it had to be done, otherwise the world would have ended under the rule of Madara for all eternity. Damn it, this isn't fair. First my family, then my friends, my godfather and godmother, and now you. Why Kami, why do you always take away those I love? He chokes out in sorrow. Hitomi pulls him into a hug while he sobbed into her shoulder and she rubbed his back and stroked his hair. I know Naru-kun, I know. Life can be cruel to even those who don't deserve it. I'm sorry, I want you to know that I love you too. And she started to fade and Naruto's eyes widened in fear as he looked at her while more tears fell from his eyes. She smiled at him while tears also fell from her eyes also. Goodbye. She fades away into a shower of sparkles. Naruto falls to his knees as the house, forest and everything else fades away and he's left into a black void. Naruto looks at the darkness with his hair shadowing his eyes. He then clenches his fists so tightly that his knuckles pop and blood seeps through his fingers. He then draws his head back and lets out an agonizing scream while tears flew from his face. Outside his mind, goodbye Hitomi-chan, he whispered as tears fell from his face as he continued to absorb the rest of the chakra. After that, the demon statue turned to sand and dissolved while Naruto fell to the ground and hit it with a thud. He then opens his cerulean slit blue eyes and looks up at the dark cave. He then slowly gets up but then feels a huge amount of pain in his eyes and clutches his face. He rolls over onto his knees and starts to shake while a black aura surrounds his body. It then goes from black to rainbow-colored and it flares around the trembling cave. He then smashes his fist into the ground, creating a small crater and then does it a few more times, making the crater bigger every time. He then rears his head back and then lets out an earth-shattering yell and a large pillar of multicolored chakra shoots out of his body and tears through the cave. It shoots up into the cloudy sky and causes it to slowly clear. He collapses and pants heavily while sweat dripped from his face. He then slowly gets up and opens his eyes. They were now red and it had a 6-bladed windmill shuriken, but a small hexagonal star shape was on the inside of the shuriken. Naruto walks over to a small pond of water and looks down at it to see his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan reflect off the water. Well Madara-tem, I guess I have to thank you and Sasuke for these eyes. He then feels the knowledge from Madara's and Sasuke as well as the abilities of their Sharingan go through his mind. After that, he focuses his eyes and finds himself being warped out of the cave. On a hilltop, a pair of black Anbu sandals appear, then black cargo pants and a dark green Junin flak jacket and the Yondaime's cape appears. After that, a masculine face and wild spiky blonde hair appear. Naruto finds himself standing on the hilltop while looking at the destroyed and ruined environment and sighs sadly. If only I knew a way to prevent this from happening, he says, but then realizes something and smirks. He focuses his eyes and says only one word. Kamui. He says. The sky turns into ripples and a human-sized vortex appears in front of him. He then jumps into it and the vortex disappears. Dimensional vortex. Naruto is now flying through the multicolored ripples and lights and his eyes were squinting from the flashes. Naruto then starts to feel funny and his body starts to twist and turn and then it started to get all wavy, as if it was changing. He then sees a flash of white light and consumed by it as does everything else becomes white and Naruto blacks out. After being out for a while he hears a feminine yet young voice. Aniki, Aniki, the voice calls out. Naruto lets out a groan when a body jumps on his torso. Aniki, wake up, it yelled again. Naruto then opens his eyes slowly and his vision was blurry at first. The face he saw was barely visible but he did see red hair. When his vision becomes clearer, he sees the face of a girl who seemed to be 6. She had the same blue eyes as him but her hair was red and it stopped to her back. She was wearing a red shirt and black pants. Naruto blinks at her for a while. The redhead raises her brows. Aniki, she asks, and that's when Naruto screamed in her face and she jumps off his waist and falls off the bed hitting her head on the ground. Naruto jumps up and looks around frantically. Who? What? Where the heck am I? He yells out as he sees he's in a large room and not that filthy apartment. He then looks at his hands and gasps. He jumps off the bed and lands on the ground and runs to a mirror that was on a dresser. He looks at himself and his eyes nearly bulge out of his head. He was 6 years old again but this time he looked like his father. The redhead gets up rubbing her head in pain and glares at her brother. Aniki, what is your problem? Why did you do that? She demands. Naruto turns around and sees the redhead who was walking towards him. She then stops and crosses her arms while staring at her brother. Naruto again stares at her and points a finger at her. Who are you? He asks and the girl looks at him in shock. What do you mean, who am I? I'm your twin Shinku, she yelled at him while Naruto, jaw dropped. What? I have a sister. A twin sister. But how? He thought while Shinku just puffs her cheeks up at him. How could you forget that we're siblings, you baka? She wanted to know. Naruto stopped contemplating on this and decided to act differently now, so he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Hey, sorry I didn't recognize you, Imouto, I'm still waking up from my nap. He lied but was inwardly sweat dropping as Shinku gave him a look of suspicion but then shrugs. That was when they heard the door downstairs slam open and the two run down the hall and see Kushina walk in the house with a pissed off expression. She was wearing a red and black ninja outfit with a green Jonin flak jacket on. Her long red hair was tied into a ponytail and strapped to her back was her okatana. Naruto's eyes widen when he sees her mother and couldn't help but smile due to the fact that she was alive in this time. Shinku was the first to come downstairs with Naruto following her. Kushina removes her sword and sat down on a black couch rubbing the temples on her face. She then mumbles about those bastards on the council and Hiruzen not growing a backbone and deal with them. Ever since Minato died and Kushina became the head of the Namikaze and Uzumaki clan, the civilians and elder council have been demanding that she hand the boy over to be executed or turn into a weapon, but today they went too far. The elders and civilians were demanding that Kushina have her son and daughter become a breeding factory when they turn 15 so that the two clans can be revived, for the good of the village, and the moment they said that Kushina killed 4 of the civilians with her sword and after beating Danzo within an inch of his life, she ripped her headband off her head and threw it at Hiruzen stating that she quit and she's retiring from the ranks and taking her children and everything Minato left to her and their children as well as everything her clan created out of the village. Hiruzen and the clan council tried to reason with her but she told them to piss off and left, but not before warning Sarutobi that if he even thought about stopping her, she'd reduce half of the ninja population. She then felt 2 tugs on her pant legs and saw Naruto and Shinku looking at her. She smiles at them and ruffles their heads. Ka-san, are you okay? Naruto asked his mother. She looks at them both and gave them each a warm and loving smile. Hey, you two, go to your rooms and go pack your things. We're leaving Konoha, she instructed, and Shinku's eyes widen as does Naruto's. Why, Ka-san? Naruto asks and Kushina sighs. Because you two are not safe here anymore. Now go on. Your godfather will be here soon, she says, and they nod. Naruto was confused at first but then realized that this timeline was different from the original. So he and Shinku went upstairs to pack up their things. 3 hours later, the house was now empty and Kushina had 3 large scrolls on her back. One was black, the other was red, and the last one was blue. Naruto and Shinku were wearing the same thing and had their packs on their backs. Kushina then takes each of their hands, and when they exit out of the compound gates, a puff of smoke appears, and when it clears, Inu, Ukami, Habi, and Neko appeared in their Anbu masks. Kushina narrows her eyes and stares at them, reaching for her sword until Inu waves his hand in front of her. Wait, Kushina-sama, the Hokage didn't send us, he replies while the other 3 nod. Kushina stares at them for a moment and removes her hand from her sword, getting a sigh of relief from them. So why did you 4 come here? Kushina asks. Kakashi removes his Inu mask and speaks up. We want to leave with you, Kushina-sama, he replies, getting a shocked look from her. May I ask why, Kakashi? Kushina asks, and the copy nin sighs. Well, you see, Kushina, you and Minato-sensei were like a mother and father to me since my parents died, and I think of Naruto and Shinku as my Otuto and Imouto. I promise sensei if anything were to happen to him or you, then I'd look after them, and if I have to become a missing nin to make sure they're safe, then I will, he says, and Kushina looks at Ukami, who nods and removes her mask, revealing Rin's face. Same here, Kushina-sama, Rin said while Neko and Hubby removed their masks, revealing Yugo and Anko. And why do you 2 want to join? Kushina asks her former students. To be honest, sensei, I am also tired of how the villagers in Konoha treat Naruto-kun, and I don't wish to protect a village that would dishonor the dying wish of the man who saved us from absolute destruction, the female Kenjutsu user says. Kushina looks at Anko and she also speaks up. You already know my reason, sensei, she says, and rubs her left shoulder blade. Kushina looks at them for a while, then smiles. Very well, you all may join us, but where is your equipment? She asks, and Kakashi smiles. I have them sealed up in Pakun, and the pack took them back to the summoning realm, he answers. Oh, well, let's go. Jiraiya's waiting for us at the west gate, she ordered, and they nod. Kakashi picks up Naruto and places him on his shoulders, and Rin does the same with Shinku. They manage to make it out of the west gate and are now running on the path, until a puff of smoke appears and a horse-sized toad that was black and red is seen on the path. They all stop when they see the frog, and Kushina smiles. About time you showed up, Jiraiya, she says, and that's when a man with long wild spiky hair appears on the toad's head with a grin on his face. Well, if it isn't Kushina and her gakis. Naruto twitches at being called a brat, but then a smirk appears on his face. Hey Arrow Sennin, he says out loud, getting gasps from the 4 former Anbu and causing Jiraiya to fall off the toad. Kushina had to hold in a laugh, and Shinku was laughing and pointing a finger at her godfather, who got up with an angry expression on his face. Don't call me that in public, he yells, and Naruto only grins. Jiraiya calms down and looks at the other 4. Hey Kushina, why are they with you? He asks, and Kushina shrugs. They wanted to join me. Now we need to just find a village. Iwa is definitely out of the question, and Suna is allied with Konoha. Kiri is still in the middle of a war, and the minor countries aren't strong enough to handle Konoha right now. So my only option is Kumo. What do you think, Jiraiya? Kushina asks, and Jiraiya rubs his chin in thought. I say Kumo is our best option. They are neutral to Konoha, and they also have 2 Biju container like Naruto, but the thing is that they treat them like guardians instead of pariahs. They also happen to be related to the Raikage, with one being his younger brother and the other his niece. I believe the girl is the container of the Nibi no Nekomata and his brother contains the Hachibi no Aoshi. He answers and her eyes widen in shock. I see. Well, Kumo, it is. Now let's go. I don't want to stay here and wait for that war hawk to send his drones after us. Yugo pulls out her ninjutsu and vanishes, shocking everyone, and then the sound of 2 slashes and screams were heard and she reappears with a bloody sword in her hand and swipes the blood away. We have to get out of here and fast, she says, and Kushina curses. You 4, get Naruto and Shinku out of here, she yells, and they nod and shunshin away. The toad disperses and Kushina pulls out her O-katana as she and Jiraiya were surrounded by 20 root ninja who had their blades drawn. Where is the demon brat and the girl? The leader demands but instantly regrets it when a murderous grin forms on Kushina's face and Jiraiya cracks his knuckles. Is that crippled old fool serious? Sending only 20 of you to deal with us? I'm insulted, he complained. I'm gonna enjoy carving you fools up, the redhead says, and then charges at the soon-to-be dead Root Anbu. Border of Hai no Kuni and Kaminari no Kuni. Kakashi, Rin, Anko, Yugo, Naruto and Shinku were waiting at the border for Kushina and Jiraiya. The twins were sitting under a tree and Shinku was sleeping on her brother's lap. Naruto was resting his head on the tree with his eyes closed and was in his mindscape. Naruto was now the same as he was when he was in the future. He walked up to the cage and sensed a powerful aura coming from the other side. That was when a pair of large red slit eyes opened from the opposite side as a pair of long white sharp teeth, and the figure growled. You, what are you doing here, Yondaime? Kyuubi no Yoko roared out while the entire place shook violently. Naruto simply stood there staring at the vixen before a small smile formed on his face. Sorry to disappoint you, Hitomi-chan, but I am not my father. Naruto answers. Her eyes widen in shock because standing before her was her vessel and not Minato Namikaze, the man who sealed her away like Hashirama and Mito did. But what surprised her the most was that he knew her name, since no one short of her creator, father figure ever called her that. She narrows her eyes in suspicion for a bit before her entire body glows and she is now in her hybrid form. Naruto walks up to the cage and looks into her ruby red slit eyes. Care to tell me how you know my name, my dear vessel? She questioned. Naruto's smile grew and proceeded to roll up his right sleeve. Hitomi watched as a series of complex seals form around his forearm and into the palm of his hand while a spiral appeared around his palm. He reaches for the paper that said seal on it and rips it off, revealing lock to the gate, and then pulls up his shirt, showing the Shiki-Fuin pattern on his stomach. As blue chakra flames form on the tips of his fingers, he places his hand around his torso and twists it counterclockwise, resulting in the lock clicking and slowly unlocking until the gates split apart and open up. The vixen remained stunned beyond belief as she witnessed her vessel free her from her seal, unaware of Naruto, who reaches out and places his hand on her face, and she tenses up at the contact but then calms down and purrs when he strokes her right ear. To simply put it, Hitomi-chan, I am not from this time and am from another realm like this, only it was destroyed by the man who used you to fight the Shadaime and my father. He says and feels her release a lot of ki in his mind. Madara Uchiha, I swear if I ever see that man I'll rip him apart. She snarled in anger. Naruto approaches her angry form and pulls her into a hug, making her freeze up from the contact since she had never experienced this form of contact once in her life. What are you doing? She questioned, startled at the physical contact only for Naruto to pull away and his gaze met hers. She was baffled by the amount of emotions she could see emitting from his eyes, ranging from happiness to regret and sorrow, and she wondered what it was about this that made her feel slightly warm. I lost you once in my timeline, Hitomi-chan. A small blush appears on her face when she hears the suffix. When I was captured by that man and another Uchiha, they were preparing to extract you and seal you into a demonic statue in order to revive the Jubi, but I created a seal that reversed the effects and I ended up absorbing the spirits of the other 8 Biju including you. I also absorbed Madara's and the other Uchiha's souls and powers into my being, gaining this. He closes his eye and opens them again, revealing a pair of red eyes with a six-bladed shuriken on the outside and a hexagonal star shape on the inside. Her eyes widen in shock as she looked into the eyes that Madara Uchiha had, only they weren't filled with malice, hatred and evil. They were filled with compassion, kindness, and love. The aura she sensed from those eyes was one of protection. In my time we fell in love and I had created a seal that would have set you free, which I just currently used. I'm also in a way the new Jubi, since its power and soul is now a part of me, and I am also in some sense immortal. I know you are different from the Hitomi I knew and loved, but regardless of that I have granted you the same thing. Whether we fall in love or not is up to you, but I won't let Madara or his organization capture you or the other vessels and their Biju. His eyes return to normal and he changes his mindscape into a beautiful forest and a house similar to the one he created from the future. I will protect you Hitomi no Yoko, and I will kill Madara Uchiha. He swore. She just looks up at him for a while and then lets out a chuckle and she smiles. This must have been the reason why my future self fell in love with you. You have the desire to protect everyone, even those who despise you for containing me. I'll hold you in regards of freeing me, kid, and when you do, well, I'll leave that to your imagination. She says in a sultry tone and kisses him on the lips and he returns it. After that, they stop and Kyuubi give him a look of lust. I can't wait till you free me, my future mate, she says, and then he vanishes from his mindscape. Outside his mindscape a smile appears on Naruto's face and then he opens his eyes. I will not let the Akatsuki win this time, he vows and looks down at the sleeping form of his sister and strokes her hair. Kakashi, Anko, Yugo, and Rin were looking out for the root Anbu, and that was when Kushina and Jiraiya appeared. Jiraiya was unharmed, but Kushina had blood on her flak jacket and her sword. She flicks the blood off her sword and removes the flak jacket, then burns it with a Kaden jutsu. Naruto sees this and slowly gets up, putting Shinku on his back and carrying her piggyback style. He places his arms around her legs so that she doesn't fall off and walks towards his godfather and mother with his sleeping Imouto on his back. Are you okay, Ka-san? Ero Senin, he asks, and Kushina smiles and nods while Jiraiya's eye twitched from the name. Yes, we're fine, Naruto-kun. She then looks at Kakashi and the three kunoichi. Well, let's get going everyone, she says, and they cross the border to Kaminari no Kuni. While taking the path to Kumo, Naruto couldn't help but wonder how his presence in this time will affect it, but now all he cared about was being with his family and starting a life away from Konoha. Kumogakure was without a doubt a beautiful place despite being a little colder than Konoha. The skies were as clear as day, mountains practically rose into the sky surrounded by clouds, and the rivers and lakes were as clear as day. Different varieties of birds soared through the sky while Kushina, Jiraiya, and the others walked on the path that was routed to Kumogakure. Naruto was currently carrying Shinku on his back while she was playing with his hair and giggling. Naruto's brow kept twitching the whole trip. Rin was watching and was inwardly squealing kawaii at this. Kushina had to hold in her laugh as she saw her Sochi's brow twitch at Shinku playing with his hair. Jiraiya nudged Kushina on the shoulder, getting her attention, and speaks to her quietly. So Kushina, when do you plan on training the squirts? The Toad Sage asks. Little did he know Naruto was listening to this with his enhanced hearing and was smirking. He already had the knowledge of all the jutsu he learned from Jiraiya during his training trip and the ones he gained from the Uchihas from his time. Once he's strong enough, he'll make sure that Madara, the Akatsuki, Orochimaru, Danzo, and everyone else who is a threat to him and his loved ones die and have a one-on-one meeting with the Shinigami before going to hell. I will not let them win this time. Madara Uchiha, you better pray we don't meet soon, because if we do, you're the first one I kill. He thought as his eyes flashed to the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan for a few seconds and back to his normal eyes. He then felt a small fist bop him on the head lightly and he turns around to see Shinku grinning at him. Am I too heavy for you, Aniki? She asks, and a small smirk appears on his face and he shakes his head. No, not really, though you do need to cut back on the Dango Imouto. he said with a cheeky grin on his face. Shinku gasps and then stretches out his cheeks with her fingers and he cries out in pain, getting everyone's attention. Are you calling me fat? She yells at him. They all sweat drop at this while anime tears go down Naruto's face from the pain of having his cheeks stretched out. Kushina giggles at this until her eyes widen and she draws her sword as do Kakashi, Yugo, Rin, and Anko. Come on out Anbu-san, she says, and that was when 6 Kumo Anbu jumped out of the trees and in front of the 8 travelers. The one wearing a lion mask and a silver white hooded cloak walked forward. We didn't come here to fight, aka no shi, Red Death, we wish to know why you, Jiraiya of the Sannin, 4 Konoha Anbu, and 2 children doing in Kaminari territory. He asks, and that was when Jiraiya spoke up. We're here to seek temporary asylum in Kumogakure and would like an audience with the Raikage about it. He answers while Kushina and the former Konoha Anbu sheathe their swords. The leader eyes them for a while and then speaks up. Is there a reason why you want a temporary asylum in Kumo? She asks. Kushina tilts her here to her son and daughter. Yes, from Konoha and for my children, she says, and he looks over at the blonde boy and redheaded female. I see. I'll inform the guards at the gate to let you pass as well as Raikage-sama, but you might want to seal away your weapons as a warning. He says, and they shunshin away. Kushina lets out a sigh of relief and then walks over to Naruto and Shinku, who was getting of her brother's back. Kakashi seals away their weapons into a scroll and Kushina picks up her 2 children, holding them in each arm, and they head towards Kumogakure. Kumogakure Raikage Tower. Sitting in his office doing paperwork while doing arm curl-ups with a large dumbbell was the Yondaime Raikage. He is a tall dark-skinned man with a large muscular build, slicked back white hair with a yellow tint, a few wrinkles, and a small mustache and beard. He wore the cage hat and robes without a shirt underneath, which further displays his hulky physique. He has black shuriken tattooed on both shoulders. On each wrist he has gold bangle bracelets, which seems to have protrusions, and has a gold belt on his waist with a lion's face engraved in the center. All of these aspects combined give him the appearance of a professional wrestler. As he was on the last piece of paperwork, his secretary walks in and bows. Raikage-sama, there's a group of people here who wish to have an audience with you, she says, and he drops the dumbbell out of his left hand and it hits the ground with a metallic thud. He looks up at the woman with a raised eyebrow. And who are they? He asks, and she speaks up. Jiraiya of the Sannin and the aka no shi. The rest seem to be Konoha nin and have 2 kids with them. She answers, and his eyes widen as he hears the name Jiraiya and aka no shi. Send them in, he orders, and she nods, leaving out the door to inform them. The door opened and Jiraiya, Kushina, and the others enter the office, and the Raikage stops writing and looks at them. So tell me, what does the Sannin and the aka no shi want with my village? He asks, and Kushina speaks up. Raikage-sama, me and the group who are loyal to my family wish to have a temporary asylum in Kumogakure. She answers, and the man's eyes widen a little before they return to normal. Is that so? Why should I even offer you all asylum here? What is it that you and your group can offer me, the cage of the village? He asks as he laces his hands together while eyeing them. Kushina closes her eyes for a moment, then opens them. Tell me, Raikage-sama, you have 2 Jinchuriki living here in the village, right? I believe one is your brother and the other is your adopted daughter Kurabi, container of the Hachibi, and Yugito ni, container of the Nibi, correct? She asks, and he nearly fell out of his seat and looks at her in shock. How do you know this? He asks, and she tilts her eyes over to Jiraiya, who was smirking. He looks at the Toad Sage and chuckles. I see, but what does my brother and Yugi have to do with your group? He asks, and she lets out a sigh and brushed her red hair back. My son is the container for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. She answers, and his eyes were now the size of saucers. Naruto walked forward and looked at the large man with no hint of fear in his eyes. The Raikage analyzes the kid, wondering why he wasn't nervous by his appearance, but then shakes it off and looks back at Kushina and noticed a smaller redhead who was behind her brother and looking over his shoulder. He then looks up at Kushina. Are they the children of the Kiroi Senku, Minato Namikaze also? He asks while the four former Anbu stiffen at this until the man chuckles. Don't worry, I hold no ill intentions like that fool of a Tsuchikage does. I actually respect your husband's power and to think that he went head to head with the most powerful Biju of the 9. Tell me, how is your son treated in Konoha? He asks and she frowns and looks at her son with sorrow in her eyes. He sees this and sighs. So they praise the father and damn the son. I never would have thought the so-called strongest village in the shinobi world would sink so low. He says and looks up at Kushina, who looks back at him and speaks again. We, meaning me, Kakashi Hatake, Enko Mitarashi, Rin Inuzuka, and Yugo Azuki would like to work as freelance nin for Urakage-sama. The same goes for my children when they're old enough. She answers. He looks at the four former Black Ops who nod and he lets out a hum and thinks for a while. The son of the Shiroi no Kiba, the former apprentice of Orochimaru, and Inuzuka, a Kenjutsu Kunoichi, and the heirs of the Kiroi Senku and aka no Shi. I'd be fool not to let them join even if it's only temporary. After all, Konoha's loss is Kumo's gain. He thought and then looks at them with a small smile. Very well, Kushina-san, I will allow you and your group to stay in Kumo and work as freelance nin for us. He says and a smile appears on her face. I only ask you of this. He says and she raises an eyebrow at him. And what would that be, Rakage-sama? She asks. I would like to train the boy personally and have my brother teach him how to use the power of the Biju he contains. He answers, getting a shocked look from her and the others. I'll consider your offer, but I want them to get the basics down first before they do any serious training. You understand my reasons, correct? She asks. He just laughs and waves at her. Yes, I do. Since you and your group want to work as freelance nin for my village, what mission ranks will you all accept? He asks. B, A, and S rank missions that consist of espionage, tracking and assassination. Those are what we specialize in. Kushina answers and he nods. He was about to speak up until the door was kicked open and a man who looked like a younger version of E walked in. He was a 6'5" dark-skinned man with a muscular build as well as white hair and beard. On his right shoulder, he has a tattoo that says Tetsu iron, and on his left cheek, he has a tattoo of a bull's horn. He also wore oval-shaped sunglasses and a white-colored forehead protector. He also wears a white-colored one-strap over one-shoulder flak jacket of a Kumogakur Jonin, with a red rope tied around his waist, white handbands, black pants and sandals, and a white scarf around his neck. He also carries 7 swords on his back. He was Kurabi Killer Bee, a shinobi of Kumogakur and the Jinchuriki of the 8-tailed giant ox. Kurabi walked in with a huge grin on his face. Big bro, what's happening, yo? He raps, getting sweat drops from the former nin of Konoha and Shinku. Naruto was inwardly groaning because the Kurabi in this time was the same as the one from the future. Couldn't rhyme and was very obnoxious. But he was without a doubt the one person you don't want to face one-on-one. He smacked his forehead while letting out a groan. Kurabi, what do you want now? If it's another vacation request then the answer is no. He says when his brother gets ready to speak up but then slumps his shoulders. Aw, come on big bro. Cut me some slack, yo. I've been spending the last month training little Yugito. He whines until he gets kicked into the back of his head by a 9-year-old blonde who had blonde hair that was tied into a ponytail and wore a purple short-sleeved shirt and gray pants with purple shinobi sandals. She was Yugito ni, the Jinchuriki for the Nibi no Nekomata. Kurabi just stood there scratching his cheek with one finger while Yugito lands on the ground and glares at the man. Kurabi turns around and sees the female blonde glaring at him with her blue slitted eyes. Oh hey kitty cat, he says, causing a tick mark to appear on her head. Don't call me that. Why did you leave me wandering the cave for 3 hours? She yells at him while the sweat drop on the others' heads become bigger. Call it survival training, kitty. Besides, you would have found your way out due to your heightened senses. He responded while she growled at him but then noticed the other people in the room staring at them and she blushed in embarrassment. Hey bro, what's the aka no shi, Toad Senin, and Konoha Anbu doing here? He asks pointing to them. They're here to work as freelance nin for our village. He replies and Kurabi looks at them and then back at Nato with a raised eyebrow. So the kid contains the fox Interesting. He says as he looks at Naruto who looks back at him. And you contain the ox. Naruto replies and Kurabi laughs at him. Hey, the kid's got spunk bro. Oi Yugito, introduce yourself to the Gaki. He says as Yugito walks up to the 6-year-old and they look at each other for a while. You're short for a boy. She says with a cheeky grin on her face and Naruto's eye twitches. I'm 6. Of course I'm short Kitty-chan. He says while her eye twitches too. Aniki. Shinku whines while the grown-ups watch this. After that, Jiraiya leaves to go check on his spy network while he gives them a 2-story house that was near the mountains in a large lake connected to a river. Once they settled in, Kushina, Anko, Yugo, Rin, and Kakashi unsealed everything she took from her former home and set the house up. Shinku was sleeping on a bed while Naruto was sleeping on the other one. In his mindscape, Naruto's older form was sitting on a bed with Hitomi, who's in her hybrid form, resting her head on his lap while rubbing the back of her right ear, getting a purr out of her while he chuckles. You know your future self loved getting scratched behind her ear also and I can see why. He says while her purr became a little louder. Less talking, more scratching. She mumbled out while he chuckles. Whatever you say Bara-chan. He drawls out and one of her tails brush against his neck. So when do I get my freedom? Or do I have to earn it? She asks as she sat up and wrapped one of her tails around his waist and gave him a view of her cleavage. Naruto chuckles and from behind his body a yellow tail appeared from behind his back and placed the tip of it under her chin and gently pulled her face forward until she was a few inches away from his face. A small blush appeared on her face as Naruto leaned over into her ear and whispered into it. Her eyes widened and her blush became bigger as she shivered as he kept talking into her, then moves away from her ear and looks at her frozen yet blushing face. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this and then he snapped his fingers in front of her face and she blinks a couple of times. Wah, she says only to see a grinning Naruto chuckling at her and she huffs and puffs her cheeks out at him. Pervert. Anyway, how do you plan to free me? She asks but then starts to purr again when Naruto rubs her behind the ear. Simple. He says with a grin on his face and then he places his index and middle finger on the collared seal on her neck and removes his other hand from behind her ear. He then performs a series of one-handed seals with his right hand and stops at the ram seal. The collar seal around her neck glows a bluish-white color. Fuinjutsu. Tenma Tugoku Gokuen. Kai, sealing jutsu. Demon imprisonment seal, release. He mutters out and the seal suddenly vanishes and a bead of sweat drops from his brow. Naruto lets out a sigh of relief and that was when Hitomi tackles him on the bed and before he could say anything she locks lips with him and his eyes widen in shock. She then releases the kiss and smiles at him. That was for freeing me of the seal. When you're a little older, I'll give you my thanks. She says with a grin on her face while Naruto just blinks and fades from his mindscape with Hitomi giggling. Naruto wakes up with a blush on his face and mumbles about perverted vixens. He looks at his 6-year-old form and lets out a sigh. Guess I'll have to wait until I turn 14. Damn it, I hate time traveling. Well, at least I still have the knowledge on the things I know in the future and I know the secret to the shadow clone jutsu. He mutters to himself until he hears the door open, and Kakashi walks in wearing an all-black Jonin outfit with a silver flak jacket. The copy nin looks and sees Naruto staring at him and the blonde grins. Hey Kakashi ni-san, Naruto says and Kakashi responds with an eye smile on his face. Hey Ototo, finished sleeping? He asks and the blonde nods. Yep, where's Ka-san and the others? He asks as he jumps off of the bed and walks towards the man. Getting some supplies for the house while I look after you two, he answers. Oh, hey Ni-san, when Shinku awakens, can you teach us how to use chakra? Naruto asks while Kakashi's eye widens and he rubs his chin in thought. Sure, why not? We'll wait for Shinku to wake up before we start, he says, and Naruto nods. 30 minutes later, Shiku wakes up and jumps out of the bed while rubbing her right eye. She walks out of the room to see Kakashi reading an orange book while her brother was twirling a fake shuriken on his finger. Kakashi looks up from his book and sees the redhead walking towards him. Hey Shinku-chan, did you have a nice nap? Kakashi asks and she nods. Guess what? I'm gonna be teaching you and your brother some of the basics of being a shinobi and how to use chakra, he said, getting a shocked look from the chibi redhead. Shinku then squealed and glomped Kakashi's leg. Kakashi chuckles at this and pats her on the head when she lets go. Come on you three, let's head outside, he said and motioned them to follow him, and they did. Kushina, Rin, Anko and Yugo were heading back to the house while carrying bags of groceries. They managed to make it back to the house and entered the front door. When they walked into the kitchen, they realized that Kakashi, Naruto, and Shinku were not in the house, so they ran around back to see Kakashi showing them a series of hand seals. Shinku was blinking and tried to mimic Kakashi's hand motions. She messes up on the boar sign, but surprisingly Naruto was able to get them all down, and then he starts to increase the pace a little after he gets all 12 down. Shinku pouts at this and Naruto looks over at her and tries to hold in a laugh, as does Kakashi, but she glares at Kakashi, who looks the other way. Naruto then sits in front of Shinku. Here Imouto, I'll help you with the seals, he says, and Naruto shows her the seals in a slow pace and she does the same. Kakashi watches the siblings work on the hand seals, and when Shinku manages to get them all down without messing up, she cheers and hugs her Aniki, who was turning blue. Kakashi was chuckling at the sight, as was the 4 kunoichi. Ahem. Kushina coughs out loud, getting Kakashi's and the twins' attention. Kakashi rubs the back his neck nervously. Oh hey Kushina-san, I was just teaching the kids some shinobi basics and hand seals. I hope you don't mind, he said, praying that she wouldn't hurt him, but all she did was shrug and smile. It's okay Kakashi, as long as you don't teach them anything dangerous. Otherwise I'd have to end your life as a male, she says while the Cyclops pales and starts to sweat bullets. Naruto didn't show it but was sweating bullets on the inside. Man, now I see why the males in the Nara clan are afraid of their wives, he thought while in Konoha. Shikaku sneezed and mumbled troublesome, only to get hit in the head with frying pan. That was when Yugo spoke up. Kushina-senpai, I know you plan on teaching Shinku and Naruto Kenjutsu, but may I teach them the basics in a few years? She asks. Yeah sensei, I want to teach the Gakis too, Anko asks with a grin on her face. Me too, Rin cries out. They then appear in front of Kushina using the puppy-eyed jutsu. The redhead sweat drops and lets out a sigh. Fine, you can train them, she answers while they squeal and do a group hug with Kushina, who was in the middle and turning blue. See, can't breathe, she squeaked out while her children laughed at her predicament. 8 years later, when Naruto and Shinku turned 7, Kakashi taught them how to throw kunai and shuriken and chakra control, like the tree climbing exercise and water walking. He also taught them how to compress their chakra and become undetected. When they turned 8, Anko and Yugao started to teach them the academic jutsu, as well as how to set traps and some survival skills like hunting. Yugo then taught them the basics for kenjutsu, and amazingly, they both were well adapted to it. When they turned 9, Rin taught them the basics on human anatomy, ijutsu, medical jutsu, like the mystic palm and chakra scalpels, and poison extraction. She also taught them how to use Senbon to attack certain parts of the human body, as well as how to treat injuries. When they turned 10, Kakashi decided to check them for their elemental affinity. Shockingly, Shinku had 3, and they were wind, water, and fire. Naruto, to everyone's shock, had 4 affinities. They were wind, water, lightning, and fire. Kushina knew mostly wind and water jutsu, so she taught them both a few D and C ranked jutsu for said elements. Kakashi taught Naruto some low-level lightning and fire jutsu while Yugo and Anko taught Shinku some fire jutsu they knew. The two siblings also met Karui, Samui, and Omoi who were genin and being trained by Kurabi. Said container taught Naruto how to use his Biju's chakra, so everyone knows, Naruto is actually using the Jubi chakra he gained when absorbing the demon's soul when the Biju from the future became the Jubi's soul. He taught Naruto some lightning jutsu as well as his form of fighting. When Naruto and Shinku turned 11, Jiraiya showed up and taught them some of his personal jutsu like the Hari Jizo, Yomi Numa, and got them started in learning Fuinjutsu. Due to the knowledge on Fuinjutsu Naruto had from the future, he managed to get the basics down. Jiraiya was shocked with how well Naruto's and Shinku's skill with Fuinjutsu was. It was as if they were adapted to knowing the sealing arts like their father. It took most beginners a long time to understand the concepts of Fuinjutsu, but both Naruto and Shinku learned it without difficulty and even started to create their personal Fuinjutsu. He also let the twins sign the Toad contract and Kushina had them sign the Hydra contract. A contract that belonged to her clan in Whirlpool before it was destroyed. So far, they could each summon a horse-sized frog and Hydra. One time Shinku summoned a saltwater crocodile and Naruto summoned a Komodo dragon, shocking both cage-level nin since you needed Junin-level chakra control in order to summon them. That was due to all the physical and chakra exercises Kakashi, Yugo, and Anko made them do, and the same went for Naruto when he trained with Ian Kurabi. When the two turned 12, Kushina taught them her sword style, Shukuchi, and Jiraiya decided to teach Naruto and Shinku the Rasengan. Naruto got it down in less than a week, but it took Shinku 2 weeks, but Naruto helped her understand the steps and she was able to make it. Naruto was also working on a jutsu similar to the Haraishin, the only difference was that it was based on pure speed and not a kunai. When they turned 13, the twins were at Itachi's level when he was 13. Naruto's skill level in the ninja arts were already on mid-Anbu level and Shinku's was high Junin level. Sitting in a lotus position in the middle of the lake's surface with his eyes closed was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. He was now 14 years old, 5 feet 7, and was wearing a black sleeveless muscle shirt and a deep blue cargo pants that has a silver lining going down it, and wore a pair of Anbu-styled sandals. He also wore a pair of fingerless gloves that had metal pads on them. He was now like a teenage version of his father, but the only difference was his slitted blue eyes and he had fangs jutting from his upper lip. He also wore a black headband that had a metal piece attached to it and it had the symbol of a whirlpool on it. His eyes snapped open and he instantly leapt up in his feet and jumped out of the lake when he saw 4 black snakes shoot out of the water and heading for him with their mouths open, revealing their fangs. Naruto bit his thumb and swiped his left wrist, which had a containment seal on it. A small puff of smoke is seen and a ninjutsu appears in his right hand. He then places it in a reversal position. When the snakes are close enough, he spins, performing a counterclockwise slash and slices the snakes apart, and he flips again in midair, landing in the water in a crouched position as the snakes feel into the water. He then twists his body to deflect a barrage of kunai that were headed towards him, and he then pulls out one silver throwing knife and flings it in order to deflect a shuriken. He runs towards the throwing knife he threw and catches it. He places the knife back in the pouch he had latched to his back and grabs the shuriken. A yellow blur was seen heading for him from behind and Naruto throws the shuriken at the blur, which moved to the right and kept charging. Naruto plants the ninjutsu on the ground and leaned back as a fist came for his head but missed and passed by. It was Yugito Ni. She is 17 years old now and her attire was different. Her hair was longer and tied into a ponytail. She also wore a silver and black shirt that hugged the curves in her body and showed off her developing D-cupped. She wore a pair of tight black pants with purple sandals and wore fingerless gloves. On her head was a Kumo headband. Ever since Naruto started to train with Kurabi, the two started off as friends, but when Yugito got older she'd tease him about checking her out when he thinks she isn't looking, and Naruto just flirted back, calling her Kitty-chan, which ticks her off a lot even though she contained the Nibi. What was even better was that he, Shinku, and Yugito always pulled pranks on the Raikager in the village just to liven the place up. Even though Naruto was a lot more serious than he was in his time, he was still a prankster at heart, with Jiraiya and Kakashi being the main victims of his pranks. Naruto then grabs her outstretched hand, shocking her, and twists his body around and behind her and presses her arm behind her back. He then wraps his other arm around her neck and applies pressure to it, getting a gurgle from the blonde. He then smells her hair while she struggles in his grip, only to wince when he squeezes her wrist tighter. "Guava berry Yugi-chan?" he asks. Yugito smirks too, and then she pushes backward, adding her weight to his, and they both hit the ground. This causes Naruto to let out a grunt and loosening his grip on her. Yugito flips backwards and lands on her feet. Naruto flips back on his feet, and with a tug of his finger, the ninjutsu is back in his hand, and he twirls it for a while before charging at Yugito with his sword poised in a stabbing position. Yugito reaches in the back of her two pouches and pulls out a pair of gauntlets that have 3 jagged claws attached to them. She charges at him too, and both swing their weapons at each other. Clang! The blades clashed and grinded against one another, sending sparks everywhere. Yugito smirks and then swings her left clawed hand at the blonde. Naruto sees this and then jumps over the attack and uses her arm as a spring and kicks her in the back, while landing on the other side. A redhead who was wearing a black and red outfit like her mother and seemed to be the same age as Naruto appears behind him and goes for a roundhouse kick. Naruto ducks and does a sweep kick at her other leg, and it makes contact, causing her to fall towards the ground, but she plants her arm on the ground and then twirls in midair, landing back on her feet. Yugito charges at Naruto again and swings her clawed arms at the blonde, who sidesteps her, and she then sends a kick to his head. Naruto blocks it with his left arm, and Shinku, who had a kodachi with a black hilt with red diamonds on it, out and does a horizontal slash at his back. When she slashes him across the back, he disappears in a puff of smoke, and replaces himself with a log, shocking both girls. Said blonde grabbed Shinku by the back of her jacket and swings her around violently and slams her into the ground, getting a grunt from the girl, and then palm strikes Yugito in the stomach, getting an oomph from the girl, who is sent skidding backwards. Naruto then pulls out 3 kunai and throws them at Shinku, whose eyes widen in horror, and she leaps off the ground while the weapons hit the ground. She then feels a tug on her heel, and the next thing she knew, she was caught in a net and started to struggle. Naruto grins at this. "One down," he says, and dodges to the side when a beam of yellow lightning misses him but scorches his cheek a little. Yugito appears behind him with a kunai near his throat, and she smiles. Naruto frowns at this, but Yugito grins. "Gotcha, Foxy-kun," she says, only for her eyes to widen when Naruto dissolves into water and feels one arm wrap around her waist and the blade of a throwing knife near her neck. "No, Kitty-chan, I have you," he says as he holds her even closer, getting a small blush from the older blonde. "Oi, Aniki, get me out of this net," Shinku calls out. Naruto points the blade he had at Yugi's neck towards the rope Shinku was ensnared in. He throws it with a flick of his wrist, and it cuts one of the lines, resulting in the redhead falling out of the net and landing on her feet. Naruto then wraps both hands around Yugito's waist and rests his head on her shoulder, making the girls blush even more. Shinku walks towards the two blondes and sighs. "We almost had you that time, Aniki," she says, sheathing her sword and placing her hands on her hips. Naruto chuckles and says, "Almost doesn't count, Imouto," he replies while she hmphs. "Whatever, I'm going home to get something to eat. You two coming, or are you gonna stay there holding Yugito?" she asks while Naruto smirks. "Yep," he says, and Yugi's eyes widen. Shinku shrugs at his answer. "Okay, bye then," she says, and disappears into a swirl of water. The blush Yugito's face remained there while keeps his head on her shoulder. Yugito lets out a sigh as he sits down with her in his arms. "You came close to catching me again, Yugito-chan. Then again, you are the youngest Junin in the village," he says while she chuckles. "True, but why can't I catch you?" she asks. "Because Yugi, foxes are tricksters. he says and kisses her cheek. Yugi lets out a small grunt and places her arms over his while lying back on his chest. A smile then appears on her face. I bet you Samui is complaining about her neck and back hurting and wants you to give her a massage. She says while Naruto laughs. Probably so. Why do you want one? He asks and she shakes her head. Nope, I'm fine, she says. You're lying, kitten. You want him to give you one of those heavenly massages. Or did you forget that I can hear your thoughts? Nibby asks her now blushing vessel. Shish, shut up Nibby, she screams into her mind while the two-tailed cat giggles. It's not my fault you want the blonde fox. What's this? An image of Naruto-kun stripping you down to your underwear and taking you as one of his. Shut up. And stop looking at my private thoughts. She roared at the now meowing demon cat. Naruto saw how red her face was and speaks up. Is Nibby telling you to get in my pants again? Naruto asks, getting a nod from the blonde female, and he lets out a laugh. Tempting, aren't I? He asks her and she scoffs and caresses his right cheek, making Naruto purr a little. He grabs her hand. Please don't do that, Yugi, he says while she smirks. Naruto then tickles her sides and she giggles. Okay, I'm sorry, she says, and he stops. He then lets go of her while getting up and helps her up. Well, I have to go, Naruto-kun. Maybe next time we can do more than cuddle, she says and poses for the blonde. Naruto chuckles and then kisses her on the lips while she returns it. After that she shunshuns away and Naruto vanishes in a swirl of white fire. Namikaze compound. Naruto appeared in the house and saw Kakashi, who was sitting on the couch watching an action movie on the flat screen TV with his arm wrapped around Rin, who was sleeping on his chest. Shinku was in the kitchen eating an apple. He walked upstairs and then went into his room. After unsealing all of his weapons, his headband, and removing his weights and sandals, he fell back onto his bed and shuts his eyes. He then feels an odd weight on top of him, and when he opens his eyes, he sees a pair of red slitted ones staring at him and grinning. It was Hitomi. She was wearing a sleeveless black tank top that hugged her hourglass figure and a pair of reddish-orange shorts. Hey Naruto-kun, did I disturb you? She asks while tilting her head to the side. A smile appeared on Naruto's face because she looked cute when she did that. No, not really. So what do you want? He asks her and a pout appears on her face. I want to snuggle. Being in that mansion inside your mindscape is boring and I have no one to scratch my ears or pet my tails. Please, I'm lonely, she pleads and pulls the puppy eyes jutsu. Naruto snickers and nods, getting a fox-like grin from Hitomi. Yay, I get to cuddle with my Foxy-kun, she says and wraps her arms around his waist and rests her head on his chest. Naruto wraps an arm around her and scratches her behind her ear, getting a purr from Hitomi, who then moves her head near the crook of his neck. Naruto then closes his eyes and falls asleep. A few hours later, Kushina was walking down the hallway towards Naruto's room and turns the knob. When she opens the door and looks inside, she sees her son sitting on his bed Indian style with a red fox that was curled up into his lap, purring as he stroked her back while wagging her tail, which meant she was happy. Naruto-kun, where did you get that fox? Kushina asks while her son looked up at her. She followed me home, and when I tried to get her to go back into the wild she just wouldn't leave my side, so I just let her come home with me, he said while the fox sits up and stretches. She then sees Kushina and yips. Go say hi to Mom, Hitomi, he says. The fox leaps off of his lap and runs towards Kushina. She then stops in front of the redhead and stares at the older redhead. Kushina crouches down and reaches out to rub the fox behind her ear. The fox lets out a happy yip and then licks her hand, getting a smile from the redhead. Well, she is cute, she says and scoops Hitomi into her arms, and the fox starts to lick her cheek, making Kushina giggle. She then sets Hitomi down, who was smiling at the redhead. Oh Naruto, the Raikage wants you and Shinku to patrol the shores of Kumogakure for 3 days, she says, and the blonde nods. Okay, I'll get my stuff ready. Does Shinku already know? He asks and she nods. Naruto then gets up and gets his supplies ready. After he finished that, he walked downstairs with a backpack and duffel bag, and Hitomi was wrapped around his neck like a scarf. He sees Shinku, who had her gear ready, and raised an eyebrow at the living scarf on his neck. "What's with the fox, Aniki?" she asks, pointing to the waging tail. "She followed me home. So you ready?" he asks, and gets a nod from his sister. "Siya Kakashi ni san," the siblings called out while the man waves without looking at them. The two then shushin away while Rin moans and snuggle into the man's chest while he holds her even closer. Meanwhile, a yellow and red blur were racing to the shores of Kumo. While this was happening, Shinku spoke up. "Hey Aniki, how far are you with your new technique?" she asks. "Not as far as I hope. I can only use it 25 times before tiring." "Why?" he asks, and she blinks. "Wow, that's actually good," she says as they leapt over some large rocks that were in a river. After running for 3 hours and checking with the Anbu at one of the patrol bases, Naruto and Shinku set up their camp near the shore and kept a comm link and a walkie-talkie with them as they went in separate directions. They also created some cage bushins, Komodo dragons, and crocodiles patrol the waters and lower levels. Naruto was currently leaping through tree branches and looking in different directions for any intruders. Naruto then tilts the small microphone near his mouth and speaks up. "Hey Shinku, have you noticed anything suspicious yet?" "Over," he asks through the comm link. He hears some static in his ears and hears a feminine voice. "No Naruto, I haven't. What about you?" "Over," she asks, and he shakes his head. "Nothing yet," he says while leaping through the trees. He then lands near a cliff where the shores are and watches the waves hit the sand. He then notices long red russet hair and a body sweeping into the sand. His eyes widen and he leaps off the cliff and skids down the rocky edge until he hits the soft sand. He then runs towards the shore where the body was. When he's close enough to the body, he turns it over and his eyes widen when he realizes who this is. "Mei-chan," he whispers to himself. Her Junin outfit was torn in some places and she had some cuts and bruises and was wearing a metal plate that had the Kiri symbol on it on her left shoulder blade. He then places his head near her chest to check her heart rate. It was slow, but she was alive, but she wasn't breathing. Naruto clicks the red button on his walkie-talkie and speaks into his comm link. "Shinku, it's me. I found an unconscious Kunoichi from Kurigakure wash up on the shores and she's still alive but barely. I need you to go to the closest tower and have a medical team come to my location," he says, and she speaks up. "Hi, where's your location, Aniki?" she asks, and he speaks up. "I'm in the northeastern section of the shoreline and 7 miles from our camp." Over. He replies, "Okay, I'm heading to the base now to get the medical squad. Keep her alive until we get there." "Over and out," she says. Naruto sighs and unzips her flak jacket and was thanking Kami she was wearing a mesh shirt under it because he couldn't keep his gaze off her chest. He then shakes his head to clear the thoughts out. He pries her mouth open carefully and places his hands over her chest to perform CPR and presses down on it a couple of times and then locks lips with her to get air into her lungs. He stops and presses his head near her chest but doesn't hear anything. He then continues the process a few more times, and after the third time of breathing air into her lungs, he quickly removes his head away from hers and she sputters and coughs out a lot of salt water while in oxygen. He helps her sit up and rubs her back while she takes in more air. His hand glows green and the chakra was healing her lungs so she doesn't strain herself while taking in air. Her breathing becomes normal but she collapses into his arms while he holds onto her. He then gets up while holding her bridal style. He turns to see Shinku and 3 Anbu medics coming towards him. He walks towards them until they are a few feet from him. "I managed to heal her lungs, but we need to take her back to out camp so she can get more treatment," he says to them, and they nod. They then head back to Naruto's camp to give her better treatment and to find out how she ended up in the shores of Kumo. The Anbu medics managed to treat Mei's injuries and left her with Naruto and Shinku because Naruto stated that he would take full responsibility for her. Shinku left to finish her shift patrolling the shoreline while Naruto stayed in the tent to watch over her while she was out. Kiri must still be in a civil war with the Yondaime Mizukage. But how did she get all the way here? He wonders until he hears her groan and slowly open her jade green eyes. She blinks a few times and realizes that she was in a tent. Where am I? She mumbles to herself as her eyes wander around and she sees a blonde shinobi who seemed to be 14 and was wearing a headband that had a swirl in it. Who are you? She asks, getting a chuckle from the blonde. Now is that any way to treat your savior Kunoichi-san? Naruto asks while she blinks for a while. Why you saved me? She asks and he nods. You washed up on the shorelines of Kumogakure and I revived you and brought you back to my tent while the medics checked your condition. He answered. Her eyes widen and she looked under the covers to see she was wearing a tank top and some shorts while her arms, legs, and torso were bandaged up and looks back at Naruto who chuckles at her glare. Relax, my sister undressed you while I was out of the tent and made sure the medics didn't pull anything funny on you while treating your wounds. I got the lump proving she kicked me out even when I was going to leave. He answers while rubbing the back of his head. Mei gives him a suspicious look for a while and she smiles back. Thank you she started to say. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. He answered, making her eyes widen. Why, you're the son of the Kiroi Senku and the aka no Shi? She asks and he nods. But if that's true then why aren't you in Konohagakure? She asks and he sighs at that. My mother took me and my sister away from there because certain members of the council wanted to either kill me or turn us into breeding factories when we got older. He answered and her eyes widened at his answer. Are you serious? Why would they want to do that to you and your family? She asks. Sorry, but it's a family secret. He answered and she huffs at it. Fine. So I'm in Kumogakure, huh? Am I a captive? She asks and Naruto shakes his head. No, I'm taking responsibility for you until our border patrol mission is over. Oh, I forgot to ask you your name. He says, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Mei Terumi, and thanks for saving me, Naruto-san. She answers and he nods. The sound of thunder hits the sky and they can hear the rain pouring on the tent. Naruto snorts and laughs while Mei sits up slowly and raises an eyebrow at him. Something humoring you, Naruto? She asks the laughing blonde. Yeah, my sister suffering in that downpour. She hates the rain. He answers but stops laughing when the tent entrance flaps open and he sees a wet and pissed Shinku. Stupid rain, stupid weather reports. I'm gonna kick that ANBUs for saying that it wasn't gonna rain. She mumbles and removes her jacket, wearing a mesh shirt and a tank top under it. Hey Imouto, he says. Shinku just glares at him and walks over to her side of the tent and sits on the ground. She removes her mesh shirt and then takes off her tank top, wearing a sports bra under it. Aniki, do you have an extra towel? She asks. Naruto pulls one out of his duffel bag and tosses it to her. Thanks, she says and wipes off her face and hair. After she does that, she places the towel around her shoulders and sits down with her legs crossed and leans back. I see our guest has wakened up. I'm Shinku, Naruto's twin. She replies while Mei's eyes widen a little and looks at the two. I'm Mei Terumi and thanks for rescuing me. She says and Shinku smiles. You're welcome. Mei then looks back at her and Naruto, whose jacket was now off, revealing a black sleeveless muscle shirt. Mei had to avert her eyes somewhere and hold down the blush that was rising and then she asks a question. You two share a tent? She asks. They blink and look at each other then look back at her. Yes we do. Why? Shinku asks. Don't get me wrong, I know you two are siblings, but do you change in the same tent? She asks. The twins look back at each other and snicker. Yeah we do, and it doesn't bother us, I mean we used to share and change in the same room when we were little. Naruto says. Mei's eyes bulge out of her head as she looks at them. What? But doesn't it embarrass you when you change in front of the opposite? She asks and they shook their heads. No, not really. They both answer with smiles on their faces. Wow, you're kind of odd for gender twins. She says, and that was when her stomach growled. The twins laugh lightly while she blushes. Naruto walks over to a cooler and pulls out a canteen that is filled with sliced fruit and hands it to Mei, who takes it and opens the lid, pulling out an apple slice. "Thank you," she says and bites down onto the apple slice. "You're welcome," he says while she takes out another and eats it. While Mei was eating the fruit out of the canteen, Naruto decided to speak up. "So Mei-san, how is it that you ended up getting washed up in Kumo's shoreline?" he asks her. Mei finishes the fruit and then sighs. "War," she answered while Shinku blinks in confusion. Kurigakure is in the middle of a civil war called the Kekkei Genkai Purge. It was ordered by our current Mizukage, who believes that bloodlines are the reasons why we have wars and want to get rid of them by purifying our village. She answered, making their eyes widen at that. "That's terrible. He's killing those that possess bloodlines just because he believes they're responsible for the wars that have been happening. That's sick and unfair to those who are innocent," she says, and Naruto sighs. "That's just how the ninja world is, sis," Naruto says, and she looks at the ground. "I know, but still, it's not fair," she protests, and Naruto nods and looks back at Mei. "Mei-san, are all of the nin from Kiri against the genocide?" he asks. "Half of them are, and they created a rebel army to fight against the Mizukage. Most of them are clans with bloodlines, but there are also those who don't have bloodlines that are with them. I happen to be a part of the rebels," she answers. That was when a thunderclap was heard and Naruto performs a few hand seals and the area around them glowed and became a barrier. Mei blinks when she feels the chakra spike and looks at Naruto. "I created a chakra barrier that'll keep the bad weather out. It's not as easy as it sounds because you need a lot of chakra to keep it active. Luckily I placed some seals that are linked to each other and they create a double-layered barrier around us," he explains. Wow, was all Mei could say due to the fact that Fuinjutsu was a very difficult art to learn and there were a very few know it. "Yeah, I've always been fascinated with Fuinjutsu. You could say it runs in my family. Shinku here is also good with Fuinjutsu, but she's not close to my level," he says with a cheeky grin on his face, but then ducks as a sandal flies past his head. "Shut up, Aniki. I'm still better than you at water jutsu," she said while he sticks his tongue out at her. "That's because Kaz-san taught you defensive-based ones while Kakashi ni-san taught me offensive ones, so Naya," he says, but then catches the second sandal while she gowers and then pouts at him, crossing her arms over her chest. "Jerk," she mumbles while he chuckles. "Anyways, our patrol mission is over tomorrow morning. We'll take you over to the Raikage's tower and you can explain everything to him," he states while she nods. "Will I be able to return back to my rebel base in Kiri? I don't want to involve a neutral village like Kumo in our county's situation," she asks. "Sure, if that's what you want to do, but do you honestly think that you can beat the Mizukage with a few rebels and bloodline users? He has Chunin, Junin, Anbu, and Hunter Nin in his forces, and it's possible that they outnumber you and your rebellion," he states, and she frowns. "I have no other choice," she says, but Naruto shakes his head. "Yes, you do have a choice. Be patient. If you try to pull a kamikaze attack against the Mizukage and his forces, they'll wipe you out before you can even enter the village gates," he replies. Mei looks at the ground and clenches her fists. "You'll just be leading those who believe in you to an early grave, Mei-san, and you know my brother's right," Shiku says and lays back on her futon. Naruto yawns and lays backing his futon also. "Look, Mei-san, I'm pretty sure the Raikage would love to help you out if you ask. He's a great Kage and he has been looking for alliances for a while. Once the civil war in Kiri is over, I'm sure he would like to make one," he says, and she thinks about it. "Are you sure I can trust the Raikage?" she asks, and Naruto looks at her and smirks. "In my opinion, yes. He can be hot-headed and ignorant most of the time, but he's also a man of honor. Something that you don't see in most ninja due to our lifestyle," he replies, and she blinks at him. "So what is your connection with the Raikage?" she asks. "I'm his former apprentice," he says, and her eyes become the size of dinner plates. "A apprentice? B, but you don't even wear a headband representing Kumo," she stated, and Naruto shrugs. "I know. Me, Shinku, My Ka-san and a few others work for him as ninjas for hire. He answers while Mei's jaw drops. Naruto looks at her and chuckles. Well, you might want to get some sleep, Mei-san. Tomorrow we're going back to the Raikage Tower so you can talk to him. Oh, and also if you can ignore his younger brother's antics. He says and falls asleep. Mei blinks for a few minutes but then lays back and closes her eyes, hoping that the boy no young man was right and can help her save her village and country. If he did, she'd forever be in his debt. I don't know why, but for some reason I feel like I can trust him. You are a very interesting person, Naruto. She thought before drifting off in her sleep. Morning. The sun shined down in the forests and Naruto opened his eyes to see Shinku snoring lightly and drooling slightly. He saw Hitome in her fox form sleeping on top her bare torso. Naruto chuckles at this and sees Mei, whose chest was rising and falling as she slept. Hitomi stirs and blinks a few times and yawns. She looks up to see Naruto, who was smirking at her, and she smiled. She then saw Mei's sleeping form and leaps off of Shinku. She walks towards Mei until she was a few inches from her face and then starts to lick her cheek. Mei stirs and giggles when the vixen does this, and Mei opens her eyes to see an smiling fox who yips at her. Mei smiles at her and then sits up, picking Hitomi up and setting her on her lap. Why, hello, are this young man's friend? She asks as she rubs her behind the ear, getting a purr from the fox. Naruto chuckles and speaks up. Her name is Hitomi. She followed me home when I was finished training and hasn't left me since. He says while she smiles at the purring fox. Don't let her innocent form fool you. She's a trickster and will steal anything shiny or pretty that she sees. He says. Hitomi glares at him and he gives her a mocking glare. Don't you glare at me, little thief. He wags his finger in front of her and she does the puppy eye look. Ah, kawaii, Mei says as Hitomi looks up at her and yips. What's that? He's a meanie and doesn't give you any attention. She says and the vixen nods. You poor thing. Naruto, how could you be so mean to something so cute? Mei asks as she held Hitomi in front of him and she grins at the blonde whose brow was twitching in size. He then takes Hitomi from a pouting Mei and places the yipping fox on his shoulder. Come on, you sly vixen. We're gonna go catch some food. If you behave, I'll catch you a rabbit. He says and her eyes now had stars in them. Naruto pulls his sandals on and he shunshuns out of the tent. Shinku then wakes up and stretches. She looks around the tent only to see Mei. Good morning, Mei-san. Where's Naruto and Hitomi? She asks. They went to get some breakfast for us. Do you happen to have any clothes I can wear? She asks and Shinku nods. She pulls a scroll out of her duffel bag and opens it, revealing a black long-sleeved shirt and shorts that seem to stop over the knees. These should work, she says and places them beside her. Thanks, she says as she removes the covers and takes off her shirt and shorts, wearing a matching blue bra and panties underneath. She puts the shirt over her head and pulls it down and puts the long shorts on. The shirt isn't too tight, is it? Shinku asks and Mei shakes her head and pulls her long hair back and ties it back. No, thanks for the spare clothes, she says and Shinku smiles. You're welcome. Say, how old are you, Mei-san? She asks. I'm 22. Why? She asks and the redhead giggles. Well, I just wanted to let you know that my brother, he has a thing for older women. She replies and Mei's eyes widen. What? Why older women? He's a pervert, isn't he? She asks as she narrows her eyes and her brow twitches. Haha, no, he's not a pervert. Naruto is a decent guy and he respects women, well, not shallow and snobbish ones. He stays away from them. The reason he likes older women is because they are more mature than the ones that are his age. Shinku explained and Mei blinks at her. Oh, he likes older women because they're more mature. But he's what, 14, 15? She asks and Shinku nods. Yeah, we are both 14 and turn 15 next year. So do you have a boyfriend? Mei asks. Shinku rubs the back of her head and blushes. Me? No. Mostly because my brother is very overprotective of me and the last boy who made a pass and tried to grope me ended up with all 4 of his limbs broken and being sterile for the rest of his life. she says with a grin on her face. Mei's eyes were now the size of dinner plates and she gawks at him. Wow, you're really lucky to have a brother like him, she says and Shinku nods. Yes I am, but he can be a pain sometimes, especially when he pulls his pranks. One time he switched my shampoo with orange hair dye, she says and her brow twitches. Mei giggles when she says that. You seem to have an interesting family, she says. Yeah, just wait till you meet my mom and the others, but you'll have to watch yourself around Kakashi ni. He's a closet pervert, she states and Mei's brow twitches. Back at the Namikaze household, Kakashi was reading his book and he sneezes on the page. Anime tears fell from his eye and he throws a tantrum, flailing his arms and legs around in chibi form. No, my autographed limited edition of ICHA Paradise Volume 3 is ruined. He cries out. Anko, Yugo, and Rin saw this and sweat drops appeared on their faces. What the heck is wrong with your boyfriend Rin? Anko asks and Rin sees the book and twitches. I have no clue, she says. Senpai just keeps getting weirder and weirder every day. Yugo asks as her sweat drop grew bigger when he started sobbing over his baby with a gray cloud hanging over his head. That was when Kushina walked in. Hey Mina, I'm Ba. Hey, what is wrong with Kakashi? Why is he mourning over Eeyore Sennin's book? She asks, pointing a finger at the morning copy nin. The three women shrug. We have no idea. Say, when is Yondaime Chibi and Shin-chan coming back? I miss the blonde-haired cutie. Anko says with a pout on her face. Rin's sweat drops, Yugo face faults, and Kushina groans. They should be home today, Anko. Kushina says in a deadpan voice and Anko's eyes lit up. Yugo gets up and stares at Anko. Are you still trying to jump Naruto, Anko? You're 23 for crying out loud and he's 14. She states and Anko shrugs. So what? He's a ninja. If you're old enough to kill, then you're old enough to do adult things like have. Anko states. Kakashi hears the word and a perverted giggle escapes his mouth. You're hopeless, Anko. Yugo states and Rin nods. Oh please Yugo, I've seen you check out his when you think no one's looking. Anko says with a smirk on her face. Rin looks at her in shock, as does Kushina and Kakashi. Shish, she's lying, sensei. You know how Anko is. The female swordsman says while a tint of pink appears on her face. Anko's grin grew even bigger. Oh please Yugo, I even hear you mumble his name, calling him Naruto-kun. She coos out and Rin's jaw hits the floor, as does Kushina. Anko, shut up. Yugo growled out as her facial appearance darkened. It's true. She even mumbled about how long his sword is. She says. That was when Yugo did the big demon head jutsu with her face glowing red. I was referring to his blade, you pervert. She yelled. Sure you were, but don't feel embarrassed. I'm sure he'd let you play with his sword. She said, but then she had to duck from a sword slash that took some of her hair, and Anko was running out of the house laughing as Yugo went after her with her katana in her hand and her eyes were glowing red. Come back here, Anko Mitarashi. I'll show you what I can do with a sword. She yelled and the others had huge sweat drops on their heads. Her mouth is gonna get her killed one of these days. Kushina mumbles and Rin nods. Kakashi just rubs the back of his head but then appears behind Rin and whispers some things in her ear, making her eyes widen and a blush to appear on her face. You hentai, she says and playfully slaps him on the shoulder but eeps when he picks her up bridal style and shunshuns to their room. Kushina's brow twitches and she lets out a sigh. I need a boyfriend, she mumbles and heads towards the kitchen. Meanwhile Naruto is heading back to the camp with 2 bags that were filled with wild berries and herbs, and 2 clones were carrying a dead boar that was tied to a long pike. Hitomi was in her hybrid form walking backwards in front of Naruto grinning. You know Naruto-kun, you should tell your family about us soon. She says and he nods. I plan on it, Hitomi-chan, just not right now. I'll tell them after we help Mei save her village and deal with the Yondaime Mizukage. So do you think it's possible for Madara to use his eyes on you again? I know the Tem was capable of doing it twice and the second time he was in his weakened state. But what's got me worried was even in his weakened state, I still couldn't beat him. If he was that strong when he was weak, I don't want to know how strong he was when he was whole. He says, and she frowns. I agree. The only good Uchiha is dead one in my opinion. They have been nothing but trouble, especially for me and my kin. They are power-hungry, arrogant, self-centered bastards who would kill even their loved ones for more power. Madara is a prime example. He took the eyes of his own brother just to gain his sight back. That is sick. I may be a demon, but even I wouldn't do something like that. Taking the eyes of a sibling. Disgusting, she says, and Naruto nods. No kidding, but the only Uchiha I will ever respect is Itachi and Obito. Obito saved Kakashi ni-san's life by giving up his own. Itachi may have been cold and odd, but at least he isn't a traitor. I still can't believe that in my time, he let himself die by Sasuke's hand just so that brat can be a hero for killing the traitor and murderer of the Uchiha clan. Hey, if only Konoha knew that they were gonna do a coup to overthrow the Sandaime. He states, and Hitomi nods. Then there is Orochimaru, Kabuto, and Danzo in his route. I need to kill either one of them soon. I'll probably have to deal with Danzo first, especially when he has those Sharingans and the Shadaime cells implanted into his right arm and eye. I swear that Izanagi technique was a pain to deal with. But then there is Orochimaru and his infatuation with the cursed bloodline. That parasitic body snatcher has to be dealt with also. I don't even want to think about what he would do if he finds out about Shinku. He growls out and his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan flashes and spins for a few seconds, and then his eyes return to normal. Hitomi saw them and smiles. You know, Naruto-kun, whenever I see your eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, I can't help but be drawn to them. Unlike Madara's, whose eyes reeked of malice and evil, yours show compassion, warmth, and purity even when you're angry. So how far are you in learning the abilities from those eyes you gained when you absorbed Madara and Sasuke's power from your timeline? She asks. Naruto rubs his chin thought and speaks up. Well, I can use Tsukuyomi for at least 120 hours and 4 days. I can also summon the flames of Amaterasu and dissipate the flames. Kamui is a little difficult to control, and my aim has to be precise like Kakashi's, otherwise I'd just be wasting chakra. I can't summon Susanoo yet, but I'm working on it. Madara's teleporting technique is very tough to use. I have to keep my concentration firm or else I'll end up tearing apart my body, so that'll definitely take a while to master. The techniques I gained from Sasuke were easy to learn. I managed to upgrade Chidori to Reikiri and use their variant forms. I can say this about Sasuke. He was a genius when it came to making variant forms of original techniques. Too bad he grew evil, otherwise I would have respected him as a rival. Hell, what impressed was when I learned how to use Kirin. I have to say, that's one hell of a jutsu he created, especially since he used real lightning with the attack. That right there takes a lot of skill and patience to master. Hell, Kakashi would have a heart attack if he found out about that technique. He'd probably give up Ika just to learn it. He said in a joking manner, and Hitomi laughed, knowing about the copy nin Kakashi and how he had 1,000 jutsu in his arsenal. He probably would. Naruto-kun, say you said that in your timeline that you absorbed the soul and powers of the Jubi, right? She asks and he nods. So how many tails can you control now? She asks and he thinks about it. Right now at least 4 tails. I don't like to rely on it because of how dense and potent the chakra is. While it doesn't destroy my body, I will end up completely exhausted and it'll take me a while to recover. But the good thing about it is that I have 2 chakra sources and can switch them at will, since the jutsu I use with Jubi's chakra will make them more powerful and cause more damage. He states, and she had a look of awe and amazement in her face. So would that make you the new Jubi, or are you still a Jinchuriki? She asks, and Naruto looks up at the sky to think about it. Honestly, Hitomi, I never thought about my status as a Jinchuriki or the new Jubi. It's possible that I'm the Jubi in a way, since its soul merged with mine. He answers and she nods. They were suddenly approaching the camp and Hitomi morphed into her kit form and leapt on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto looked at the clones and spoke. Get a fire ready and start to skin the boar, but leave the fur and tusks clean. Once you're done gutting it, remove the parts we don't eat and toss them somewhere out in the woods. I don't need predators and scavengers getting into our camp, he says, and they nod as they drop the pike and pull out some blades and get to work on the boar. Naruto opens the bag and pulls out a dead rabbit. Here, Hitomi, he says. She yips and grabs the rabbit, running off with it into the forest so that she can eat it in peace. Naruto chuckles at this and walks into the tent with the bag of fruit. Hey you guys, I'm back, he says as he places the bag of food down. It that all you got, Aniki? Shinku asks, and Naruto shakes his head. No, I have some clones outside skinning and disemboweling a boar outside, he says as Shinku grabs the bag and pulls out 2 apples and a mango. Who wants the mango? Shinku asks. Naruto holds his hand out and she tosses it to him. Naruto grabs it while she hands the second apple to Mei. Shinku's cheeks bulge and she sprays water onto the apple. Mei does the same while Naruto peels the skin off the mango and sprays it off with a water jutsu. After that they start to eat the fruit until Naruto speaks up. Hey Imouto. Yeah, she replies as she bites into the apple. How far you on elemental manipulation part for the Rasengan? He asks, getting Mei's attention on the jutsu that ended the last war. Not that far. The manipulation of pure chakra is tough enough, but adding your affinity and stabling it is even tougher, she says, and Naruto nods. No kidding. I'm halfway through the wind manipulation part. I need to find a way to control it and keep it balanced, otherwise I'd end up blowing my hand off, he says, and Shinku cringes at the thought of losing an arm. So you two are working on mastering your father's technique. Interesting, Mei says, and they smile. Yeah, that would be amazing. Iwa would have a heart attack if they found out that the children of their most hated enemy improved one of his jutsu. I'm also working on making different versions of the Rasengan. I made one that's based off a windmill shuriken and one where it's a larger version of the Rasengan. Another one I'm creating is based off of a drill, Naruto says, and Mei's jaw drops. He made different versions of the Yondaime's technique. Shinku giggles at her reaction. Don't be so shocked, Mei-san, I'm also making my own versions of the Rasengan, though mine are based more on speed than strength. Right now I'm working on one that I can use for long distance. Kind of like how the puppet users in Suna use their puppets, she explains. Mei looked like she was about to pass out but then speaks up. If I may ask, how strong are you two? She asks, and Naruto answers. Me, I'm at low to mid Anbu level while Shinku is around low to mid Junin level. We just lack the experience they have. If we go all out, I'm around high Anbu and she is high Junin, he says, and Mei just gapes in awe. Our mom and other members of our family trained us to the ground. That and the Raikage and his brother are psychos when it came to physical training, Naruto says, and back in Kumo the lightning brothers sneeze. If I may ask, if I were to fight you both, would I win? Mei asks, and Naruto grins at her. Yeah, you would, since you have more experience than us, but we can give you a run for your money, he answers, and she smiles back. Well, at least you're humble about it. Most teenagers your age wouldn't be this strong, and if they were, they'd gloat about it, she says, and they nod. Naruto then smells burning meat. Looks like my clones are done with the boar. I'll be back, Shinku, Mei-san, he says, and gets up and leaves the tent. When he exits the tent, he sees the skinless boar being roasted over a flame on a pike. One clone was cleaning the fur skin while the other was cleaning the tusks it removed from the boar's head. That was when Hitomi appeared from the bushes licking her muzzle, which had some rabbit blood on it. Naruto sees her approach her and smirks. I take it you enjoyed that rabbit, he asks. She looks at him and releases a belch, and a tint of pink appears on her muzzle, making him chuckle. I'll take that as a yes, he says, and she glares at him, which in his opinion made her look cute. You know no one will take that glare seriously, Hitomi-chan. It makes you looks like an angry puppy, he says, and she yips while her ears fall down. Naruto laughs at how she's acting and rubs the top of her head. None of that now, Tomi-chan, he says as he picks her up and places her on his shoulders. She then licks him on the cheek while he strokes the side of her neck and watches the boar cook. Naruto pulls out a small scroll and opens it. In a puff of smoke, a pair of plates with forks and knives appear. Naruto pulls out a knife and cuts into the boar, removing small slabs of cooked meat and place them on each plate. Naruto heads back into the tent. With the 3 plates, "Who wants boar steak?" he asks with a cheeky grin on his face. Shinku rolls her eyes and takes 2 of them and hands the other one to Mei. "This smells great," Mei says as she takes the fork and knife and cuts a small piece off with a knife and places it on a fork. She lifts the fork to her mouth and bites down on the warm tender meat and chews on it for a while before swallowing it. "This is good," she says and starts to eat more of the steak. "Yeah, I prefer this over deer meat," Shinku says while Naruto nods. "No kidding. Hey, remember when Anko and Yugo took us on that survival trip and you ate those glowing mushrooms?" Naruto says as he snickers at the memory because Shinku's entire body glowed green for 3 days and after that, she fell into a bush filled with poison ivy and had rashes everywhere. Then she ended up eating green berries by accident and her skin broke out and she swelled up like a balloon, and during their final day, she picked up a skunk by accident and got sprayed. Naruto had never laughed so hard in his life. Shinku glared at her snickering brother and huffed. "That was the worst survival trip ever. I have never felt so humiliated in all my life," she mumbles and Naruto laughs out at the memory. "Oh man, what a trip. Anko would never let you live it down. You know she still has the pictures, right?" he asks and she pales. "What? I thought she got rid of them," she says and Naruto shakes his head. "Shinku, this is Anko we're talking about. You know she's a prankster like me, only worse. I still can't believe you picked up that skunk. Mom had to leave you out in the backyard for a whole week," he states and she blushes in embarrassment and anger. "I was 8 for crying out loud and I thought it was a cat," she yelled, but Naruto laughs even harder. "Imouto, please, that's the lamest excuse ever. Even I know the difference between a weasel and a cat. I'm so glad I bolted out of there before you realized what it was," he says while recalling the memory in his head. Flashback. 8-year-old Naruto and Shinku were done with their survival trip and were currently packing their gear up. Anko and Yugo were cleaning up the camp, making sure that they didn't leave anything the wildlife could get. Shinku had put an empty oil lamp in her pack and noticed something that was black, white and furry. Naruto had finished burying some leftover bones on the ground when he heard Shinku. "Hey Aniki, look what I found," she called out. Naruto groaned and walked towards his sister who had her back turned. "What is it this time, Shinku, and please don't tell me it's poison ivy?" he asks. "No, I found a cat," she says as she turns around grinning with a black and white cat in her arms. Naruto's eyes widen and he steps back. That's not cat, Shinku, and please put it down slowly," he says as he backs away slowly. Shinku blinks in confusion and walks forward. "What's wrong, it's just a cat," she says, but then Naruto bolts out the area screaming about a skunk. Shinku blinks and holds the skunk away from her face. "What's a skunk?" she asks the cat, and it wags its tail and grins evilly. Shinku once again blinks, but then her eyes widen. "Oh," she said until it was too late. Naruto ran towards Anko and Yugo and pulled on their pant legs, getting their attention. "What's up, Yondaime Chibi?" Anko asks and a tick mark appears on his head. "Don't call me that, Yu-chan. Shinku just picked up a..." "Kya," Shinku screamed. "Skunk." He finished, making their eyes widen and they head towards the spot where Shinku screams. When they get there, they see Shinku surrounded by a green mist and she was coughing and rubbing her eyes. Anko caught a whiff of the skunk scent and she suddenly moved backwards while clutching onto her nose and mouth while her eyes watered and twitched. Naruto was hiding behind Yugo with his shirt over half of his face while the female swordsman had a hand over her mouth. "Oh sweet Kami. Shinku, what the hell were you thinking picking up a skunk?" Anko asks. "Cough cough, I thought it was a cat." Shinku says and continues to rub her eyes. You thought it was a cat? Oh great, first the glowing mushrooms, then the poison ivy, now a skunk. What's next? You're gonna play fetch with a wolf? She says sarcastically. Don't jinx it, Anko. Naruto yells and Shinku glares at Naruto and crosses her arms. Kami Kushina-sensei is gonna strangle me when we come back with the skunk princess. Anko mumbles. So who's gonna take her? She turns around to see Yugo and Naruto gone, leaving a dust trail, and a tick mark appears on Anko's head. Oi, get back here, you cowards. Don't you leave me here with Ms. LePew. She yells while shaking her fist. Flashback ends. By the time Naruto was finished talking about the incident, Mei was clutching her sides while laughing. Shinku's face matched her hair color, and right now she wanted to throttle her older brother. I hate you, Aniki, she mumbled while Naruto grinned. Love you too, Imouto. Did I mention that Ka-san made her stay outside in the backyard for a week? He says, and that only made Mei laugh even harder. That's it, you're dead, Aniki, she screams and tackles him out of the tent. They roll over on the ground for a while and Shinku was now on top of him. Naruto was currently laughing as he held her wrists away from his neck. That was when two Kumo Anbu appeared and sweat dropped at the scene. The one with the lion mask coughed to get their attention and they looked up. Can we help you, Shishi-san? Naruto asks as Shinku blushed due to the fact that she didn't have a shirt on and ran back into the tent while Naruto stood up, dusting off his pants. We were sent here to inform you that your border patrol is done and that a different squad of Junin will be taking your place. Shishi, lion, stated, and Naruto nods. Thanks. We'll be leaving soon, Naruto says, and the two Anbu shunshin away. The Namikaze siblings managed to clear the camp and Mei helped also. After they packed up, they headed back to Kumogakure with Mei following them. Naruto had given Mei a black flak jacket so that the males of the village wouldn't look at her chest. As they walked through the village, Naruto and Shinku were greeted by some of the villagers and ninja there. Mei saw and talked to Naruto. You two are pretty popular with the citizens of this village, she says, and Naruto chuckles. I think it's due to the pranks I played when I was younger and when I was training with the Raikage and his Ototo. When me and my family got here, the place was dull, but when I came, well, let's just say that the village hasn't gotten boring, especially when the Raikage sent Junin and Anbu after me whenever I prank him or certain members of his council. But I can say this about the civilian and shinobi council members. They can take a joke better than those stuck-up snobs that live in Konoha. He says, and Mei raised an eyebrow at this. Shinku started to get frustrated and spoke. Aniki, do we have to walk to the tower? Why don't we just shunshin there unless you're hoping to run into Yugi-chan or Samui-chan? She said with a grin on her face. Naruto blushes and glares at his Imouto. Shut up, he says, and grabs Mei's hand and doesn't realize the blush she had from the contact, and they shunshin to the tower. Raikage Tower. E was currently doing arm curl up with a dumbbell in his right arm but had his chin resting in his hand and had a bored look on his face. Why did I take this boring job again? I've been doing arm curl ups for the last 3 hours and I'm bored as hell. Where's Kurabi when you need him? At least I get a good workout with him or Kushina, he thought, until Naruto, Shinku, and a woman with russet hair appear in his office. He blinks when he sees them and then drops the dumbbell, causing the office to shake and Naruto's sweat drops. Bored Raikage sensei? Naruto asks with a grin on his face, and the man's brow twitches. Shut it, Gaki, unless you want to be my sparring partner for the next 4 hours. He says with a smirk on his face when he sees Naruto pale and waves his arms up in defense. Even though he knew how strong E was in the past, there was no way in the world that he could fight the guy in his current state. The man could split a small mountain in half with just one of his arms or legs and possessed strength that rivaled, if not was on par with, a Jinchuriki's. He's even seen the man leave dents in steel plates with just a headbutt. Kurabi was just as bad even without his Biju's power. These were the last 2 people you'd ever want to face in the battlefield, and he saw how powerful they were when they took out Kisame during the 4th Shinobi War. Sorry sensei, but I like living and not having my bones broken. He says, and the man snorts. Cheeky brat. So would you like to explain to me who your companion is? He asks. Oh, this is Mei Terumi, a kunoichi from Kurigakure. She washed up on the shoreline near the border and stayed with us since. Shinku explained, and looks at the nervous woman. I see. Isn't Kurigakure in the middle of a civil war right now? He asks Mei, who nods. Yes, I'm a part of the rebel group. The Yondaime Mizukage and his elite guards were on a ship and my group made an attempt to raid the ship, capture if not kill the man, but he expected us to pull that stunt. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was him being covered in some kind of chakra cloak, but it was more potent and in a way sinister. She says, making their eyes widen. Mei-san, it's possible that the Mizukage is a Jinchuriki. Naruto says, and her eyes widen in horror. Jinchuriki. Oh Kami. No wonder I couldn't face him. He's a container for a biju. She says quietly. Yep. There aren't a lot of nin out there that could fight, let alone beat a Jinchuriki. Unless of course you had the abilities of the Shadaime Hokage, or you're also a vessel who has a stronger biju. Like me. I'm the vessel for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto says, and her eyes widen in shock. But unlike the Mizukage's biju, me and Kyuubi are on good terms despite the fact that it was my dad that sealed her into me. Kumo also have two vessels living here and they too get along with their biju. Naruto states, and Mei just stares at them. Coughs to get her attention. My Deshi is right. My Ototo and my adopted daughter contain bijus and they cooperate with each other to secure their survival. He says, and she just nods. I see. Reikage-sama, I know this is asking a lot and I don't want to involve you with Kiri's situation, but I was hoping that if it was possible for you to aid the rebel side in the war. We are mostly clans with bloodlines and some are regular Junin or former Anbu. She requests, and raises an eyebrow. You're requesting a neutral country to aid you in a war we have no part in. Do you understand that this action could start another great shinobi war? He asks, and she lets out frustrating sigh. Yes, but what choice do I have? We're being hunted non-stop and half of our forces are already gone. We can't keep this up and it's only a matter of time before the Mizukage decides to purify the other nations that have bloodline users. She answers, and rubs his chin in thought. It's possible that could happen. Kumo would most likely be the first since we're a lot closer than Konoha is, and I will not let that ignorant fool of a Mizukage try to pull that stunt. This is a lot to think about, Mei-san. I'll allow you to stay in Kumo until I make my decision. Do you need lodging for the time being? He asked. Mei was about to answer until Naruto spoke up. She'll stay with us for now, Reikage-sama. My mother won't mind. Naruto says, and Shinku nods. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. Mei states, only for Naruto to wave it off. Don't worry, we have plenty of room, but a little warning. Keep you distance from Anko. He says, and she blinks with a confused look on her face. Shinku giggles but then grabs her hand and they shunshin away. See ya, sensei, and try not to put another human-shaped hole in the wall. He says, and shunshins away also. Mumbles about blonde cheeky brats getting on his nerves. That was when Kurabi kicks the door off its hinge and it collides with E's head, but it doesn't even faze him as it bounces off his head and a tick mark appears on the cage's head. Kurabi had a grin on his face and starts to rap. Big bro, Kurabi and Yugito ni have completed the mission, yo. He says. Yugito kicks Kurabi in the back of his head while her brow twitches and she too had tick mark on her head. Shut up with the stupid rhymes. I'm surprised he hasn't killed you yet. She yelled while Hachibi was in his container's mindscape, begging the man to him and put him out of his misery and saying that Kurabi's rapping was a fate worse than death. Please don't encourage me, Yugito. Mumbled as he wiped the debris from the door off his face. She then sniffs the air and a grin appears on her face. Naruto and Shinku have been here, right? She asks. Nods, but before he could says anything, his adopted daughter was gone, via flame shunshin. I swear she can't go one day without playing with that boy. He says. Kurabi snickers and speaks up. The fox liked to play with the cat. What up with that? He asks, and the tick mark on E's head grew even bigger. 10 seconds later, Kurabi was seen flying across the village courtesy to E. Karui, Omio, and Samui see this and sweat drops appear on their faces. They see the man land in a hot spring bath houses on the women's side and hear them scream pervert, and the sounds Kurabi getting beaten are heard and their sweat drops grew. Should we go help him? Omoi asks, and the 3 kunoichi shake their heads. Nope. I'm gonna go find Naruto-kun. My neck and back are sore, she says as she cracks her neck. Karui rolls her eyes and grabs a lollipop from Omoi's bag, and on it. Did you take the last strawberry-flavored one? He asks. She pulls the out of her mouth and it was blue. Go ahead and keep it. I hate blueberry, he says and walks away while she head to the hot spring to rescue